Good morning, church. Our reading today is from Luke 8, verse 40 through to 56. Please join with me in standing to read the word if you're able. On the other side of the lake, the crowds welcomed Jesus because they had been waiting for him. Then a man named Jairus, a leader of the local synagogue, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come home with him. His only daughter, who was about 12 years old, was dying. As Jesus went with him, he was surrounded by the crowds. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding, and she could find no cure. Coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe. Immediately, the bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. Everyone denied it. And Peter said, "Master, this whole crowd is pressing up against you." But Jesus said, "Someone deliberately touched me, for I felt healing power go out from me." When the woman realized that she could not stay hidden, she began to tremble and fell to her knees in front of him. The whole crowd heard her explain why she had touched him and that she had been immediately healed. "Daughter," he said to her, "your faith has made you well. Go in peace." While he was still speaking to her, a messenger arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. He told him, "Your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now." But when Jesus heard what had happened, he said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just have faith, and she will be healed." When they arrived at the house, Jesus wouldn't let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, James, and the little girl's father and mother. The house was filled with people weeping and wailing. But he said, "Stop the weeping. She isn't dead, she's only asleep." But the crowd laughed at him because they all knew she had died. Then Jesus took her by the hand and said in a loud voice, "My child, get up." And at that moment her life returned, and she immediately stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were overwhelmed, but Jesus insisted that they not tell anyone what had happened. This is the word of the Lord.
Morena te whānau. I am Richelle and, well, I'm just Richelle. That's kind of just who I am. And it's my privilege to share with you this morning about this story, mainly because my husband said, a woman needs to preach it and you're on holiday, so, you know. Well, there you go. So up until this point, Jesus had a pretty busy time. In chapter 8 alone, he has travelled from town to town proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God. He's had a bunch of special people travel with him, including the disciples and some women who had been cured of evil spirits and disease. He told a couple of cryptic stories that no one seemed to understand. He got on a boat, he managed to fall asleep on the boat, and then was rudely woken up by someone who was freaking out about a storm, so he calmed it for him. Honestly, if that storm's anything like the Cook Strait Ferry on some days, I would have asked Jesus to help out too. And then he sent a large group of demons out of a man and into a drove of pigs, and then they ran down a hill and jumped in a lake and drowned themselves. So now Jesus is back on dry land, and surprise, surprise, there is a crowd waiting for him. And at this point, as if Jesus hasn't had enough of people, Jairus came to him and fell at his feet, pleading, begging for him to come to his place, which was an unheard of thing, and heal his dying daughter. She was only 12 years old, probably was in year 8 at her local intermediate school, and she was his only daughter. Jairus was one of the leaders in the synagogue. He was powerful and probably quite wealthy, and most leaders of the synagogue weren't overly fussed about Jesus and what he was claiming. But Jairus was desperate. His daughter was dying, so he threw himself, an act of absolute humility and powerlessness, at the feet of someone he believed could help her. Jairus had both hope and faith in Jesus. What a relief. Can you imagine what a relief Jairus must have felt when Jesus went with him to his home?
"12 years. 12 relentless years. Each sunrise, just a cruel reminder that nothing has changed. And each sunset, an echo of my despair. I was a prisoner, not behind stone walls, but within my own failing body. My life was marked by absence. Absent from home, absent from gatherings, absent from touch. To them, I was not a woman. I was unclean, rejected. Hope had become just a fragile thread, frayed and brittle. Doctors' promises just dissolved into dust. And my prayers, they slipped unnoticed into heaven. My body weakened, my spirit withered, and I existed in the shadows, unseen, even when standing in the light. Then whispers reached me, stories of a man named Jesus, the healer, the teacher. His words calmed storms. His touch restored the broken. Could it be true? Could he mend what has been shattered in me for so long? I found him amidst a sea of people. Their voices were a roar and their bodies all pressed in. My heart was hammering against my ribs. What if they recognize me? What if they push me away again? But desperation is a fierce companion. It moves you when fear says that you can't. I didn't need his attention. I didn't even need his words. I just needed a single touch. Even just the fringe of his cloak. And so I reached out, stretched my fingers out, and I just touched his cloak. And in that moment, just a fleeting brush of fabric, but it was as if I had grasped the edge of heaven itself. And in an instant, warmth just surged through me, like light pouring into the darkest corners, the bleeding, the ache, the emptiness. It all stopped. Gone. After 12 years of suffering, my body sang with life. But then Jesus stopped and he turned and he said, "Who touched me?" My heart froze. I was terrified. Not just of being seen, but of being known. I wanted to fade back into the crowd, to carry my healing quietly. But hiding just didn't fit this woman I had become. And so I stepped forward. I was trembling. And the crowd parted, their eyes sharp with curiosity. "This is me," I wanted to say. "The woman you've ignored. The one you call unclean." But his gaze found me, not with condemnation, but with a depth that unravelled my shame. "Daughter," he said, daughter. One word. That's all it took to undo 12 years of isolation. Daughter. Not stranger. Not outcast. Not reject. Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. I came seeking healing for my body, but I left with restoration for my soul. I had been a shadow, but he called me into the light. I had been overlooked, but he saw me. I had been broken, but he made me whole. Sorry.
I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm not very holy or gracious at all. If I put myself in Jairus' shoes, this would have been one of those times. How dare that woman steal a healing from Jesus when he was clearly on his way to heal my girl? How selfish of her to delay him, to put my girl's life in jeopardy. I hope he has enough power left to heal her. Otherwise, I'm probably going to use some expletives. I would have felt anxious, frustrated, angry, fretful, and if I'm honest, I probably would have been feeling those things towards Jesus too. At this moment, someone comes to Jairus in the story and tells him not to bother Jesus anymore. It's too late. She's gone. His precious little girl has died. Oh, my heart. Now, I haven't lost a child in this life, so I can only liken what Jairus must have felt to when we left to live and serve in Colombia. As I hugged our youngest boy goodbye, I felt my chest tighten and the tears flowed. I first forced myself to turn my back and walk through immigration before collapsing into a sobbing heap on the floor. I felt sick. My heart felt as though it had literally broken in two. It was a physical pain. I couldn't breathe or speak. I couldn't move. On the plane, that sobbing never stopped and I never ate a thing. The air hostess came to check on me as I held my chest and struggled for breath. I was so distraught, I cried for 3 days straight, not eating, barely sleeping. That kind of grief is all-consuming and inescapable. We're not told how Jairus reacted to the news, but we do know that as soon as Jesus heard it, he said to him, "Don't be afraid, just believe and she'll be healed." Excuse me? She's dead. The New Living Translation that we had read to us says, "Just have faith." We hear that a lot, don't we? All you need is faith. Just believe. As if it is on us to believe enough for the miracle to happen. Scripture tells us that we only need faith as small as a mustard seed to move mountains, which really you don't ever need to do unless you're trying to build a highway across the Ruahines. So that is in Matthew 17:20, not the Ruahines, but the mustard seed. There's a lovely verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 that says, "And now 3 things remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love." I'm going to suggest that yes, the greatest of these is love, but the hardest of these is faith. Jairus' faith was expressed as a confidence in Jesus' power to heal. He had just seen this in action when he witnessed the miraculous healing of the woman just moments before. Sometimes I think faith can look like a confidence, an unwavering trust in Jesus. Sometimes it can look like a fake it till you make it kind of situation. And other times, I think it looks like a tentative step in opening a door to a dark room with some hesitancy and caution. All are acts of faith. All are examples of a mustard seed. When Jesus and Jairus get to the house, there's a crowd of people weeping and wailing at the loss. Jesus chose just 5 people to go in with him Peter, John, and James, and the little girl's parents. He told the crowd to shush because she wasn't dead, she was asleep, and they laughed. And I probably would have too, because when someone is dead, they are dead. And there is no way it could be mistaken as asleep. For a start, they would usually be snoring. Hey, Nige. It's my turn, I get to get him back. Right. But Jesus wasn't saying she wasn't dead, but rather that her death, like sleep, was limited in time. This beautiful little girl was dead. But in this story, it wasn't a permanent state, a bit like what we know was in store for Jesus. He too would die, like really die, but his death would not be going to a permanent state, but a transitional one that would ultimately bring about the greatest miracle of all time, his resurrection. I think following Jesus into a house after being told your daughter was not dead but asleep is one of those mustard seed moments. Did they tiptoe in quietly with caution, or did they boldly step into the room with Jesus taking the lead? Either way, once Jesus got there, he took the child's hand and simply woke her up. There was no screaming alarm clock, no dog licking the face, no waving of hands, no pushing back of darkness, just a simple hand up. And a few words brought breath back to her lungs and life to her body, and she stood up. Verse 56 says, her parents were astonished. You think? I would have been completely freaking out. And then he told them to feed her. That's one way to confirm the presence of life, I guess. Give someone a good hearty breakfast or a cake of Whittaker's creamy chocolate. Oh, and by the way, don't say anything to anyone about this. These 5 people, well, 6 if you count the daughter, have just witnessed an incredible miracle and even got an insight into what Jesus has been alluding to for a very long time. Did they fully understand it all? Maybe not, but they seem to have kept the secret. In some ways, the full depth of the story was not theirs to tell. It belonged to Jesus. 24 years ago, I witnessed a miracle. My dear Ecuadorian friend Jenny had incredible pain in her abdomen. We took her to the hospital and her appendix was removed, but the pain continued. Further investigation through scans and x-rays showed that Jenny had just one ovary with a really large cyst on it. The ovary needed to be removed. For Jenny, this was more than a simple surgery. This was going to end her chances of ever becoming a mother. We prayed, we cried, we grieved what would never be, and then we went for the final checks before surgery. On that day, the doctor brought us the new scans and x-rays, and she reached for the old ones in astonishment. Where once there was one ovary with a really large cyst, now there were 2 healthy ovaries. I'm going to cry. We all cried, and we all praised the Lord for his mercy and his power. Yes, Jenny was healed, but this story was never about her, but rather the incredible power and humanity of a loving God who heard our cries and answered them in the most miraculous way. Just like Jenny, the story of Jairus' daughter is not ultimately about her, but rather it was another sign that the Messiah walked amongst them and that he would die and then rise again for all. The world wasn't completely ready to hear or understand, so those 6 people kept silent. We don't always understand why what he does or doesn't do, but our little mustard seed of faith gives us the ability to let Jesus do or not do what he needs to. We shouldn't judge another person's seed, its size, its colour, its shape. There isn't one way to hold faith, and there sure isn't just one way to express it. It doesn't matter how long you've lived this life of faith, there are times when you feel like you just don't have enough. Yes, I still think the hardest of all is faith. But all that is asked of us is to have faith the size of a mustard seed. God does the rest. He is the one who waters it, feeds it, shines light on it, and ultimately grows it into one of the biggest trees of all. Jairus gives us an example of faith in action, and Jesus shows us what he can do with that. Jairus just turned up and asked, and Jesus did the rest. That's all we have to do. Turn up and ask. Jesus will do the rest.